Welcome to Grow Virtually, an online horticultural educational program presented by the Master Gardener Volunteers of Cobb County. Under the guidance of the University of Georgia Cooperative Extension Service, we grow gardeners.
We're honored to have as our speaker tonight, Mary Cahill-Roberts. Mary took up the hobby of beekeeping to help her blueberry bushes, and in doing so became immersed in the wonderful world of beekeeping. Mary is a master beekeeper from Georgia with 13 years of experience. She manages several apiaries, including a community garden. She owns the company Swarm Chasers Apiaries, located in Mapleton, and specializes in comb honey. Mary is a senior Welch honey judge and has even judged internationally. Mary enjoys sharing her beekeeping and honey knowledge with everyone, and tonight we're lucky enough to have her share it with us. Mary, you can take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. So this presentation, I call it Beekeeping U 101. These are my credentials. At the end, I hope you can see my email address down there, and I'm happy to take any questions. You can call me. I can give you my phone number if you desire, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that anyone might have about beekeeping. But I wanted to give you a few objectives and just a little bit of a history lesson of American beekeeping, starting from worldwide beekeeping, and then give you some basics about it, give you an overall cost, and that answer for cost, it depends. And if you ask any beekeeper, what will happen is you will have one beekeeper say it costs anywhere from $500 to $1,000. Another beekeeper say no, it's free. So the answers depends, and that's a good question when you ask beekeepers. The answer is going to be depends. And then if you decide you want to become a beekeeper, I'll be happy to help you and direct you in any way that I can. Or I hope that you will support a local beekeeper, because we do have a symbiotic relationship, I believe, with the master gardeners. The bees help pollinate your plants, and your plants provide forage for our bees. So just a little history. We've been using honey for over 5,000 years. When I first learned about beekeeping, I had read about the Egyptian tombs, and they had honey in there. And supposedly somebody ate the honey, and it was over 2,000 years old, and it was still good, which is surprising. But I could not find the name of anyone who admitted to eating the honey from 2,000 years ago. When they were doing an oil line in Georgia, the country Georgia, not the state, they found a cave that had honey preserved in pots that was 5,500 years old, and the honey was actually for a medicine woman. It was a very high-ranking woman that the tribe that was there was honoring her. In her afterlife, she was going to have the honey with her. It's a very important role. It's used for a lot of different things, especially in the past. It was used for a lot of things. Specifically, one was embalming and preservation of items. So when the United States and America was discovered back in 1607, that first came in Jamestown, as everybody knows. The first successful beekeeping shipment from the European area came in 1622. That's our first recorded history in beekeeping. And if you think about the timing and think about the amount of time that the bees had to stay on the ship, and that they naturally leave their hive every day to go forage, the minimum amount of time that a ship would cross the Atlantic at that time was 42 days, but it could take up to 90 days. So that it would behoove them to ship them in the winter when they were in cluster, so that they would stay in the hive and hopefully survive. The next shipment of bees that was recorded was about 17 years later, 1638, or 16 years later in 1638. So it was very difficult to ship honeybees from Europe to America. When the bees came into America, they spread pretty much like wildfire. Part of the natural beekeeping propagation is if you have a whole hive, the bees are meant to divide, and it's not as an individual, but it is as a colony. So the colony division, or the colony birthing process, is the queen in the springtime when there's a really good nectar flow and pollen flow. The bees will decide that this is a good time this is our best chance and our best success for the queen and us group of bees to leave this hive and go find a new home and collect enough resources to get through the winter, to survive, to continue to propagate. And so in the 1600s, there were thousands of trees, tons of forage. They came into Virginia and spread pretty quickly and pretty rapidly. The one hive can throw off 5, if during a really good nectar flow in the springtime, can put off 5 to 10 swarms, and they will go up to 2 to 3 miles away from the original hive. So as you can see, they can roam pretty fast. Here's an example. In 1950, there was a German scientist, I believe, or Venezuelan scientist, that got African honeybees from Africa and took them into South America. And it took about 50 years for those bees to get to North America. I think we had our first Africanized honeybee, I'm sorry, in the United States, not North America, sometime in the 1990s to 2000 arena. And we're talking thousands and thousands of miles that these bees traveled, starting down in I believe it was Venezuela, and coming north, moving all the way north through that landmass. Pretty impressive. So that's a little bit. Oh, and then in the 1800s, there was a Reverend Langstroth who discovered or studied bees and then found out about bee space and developed a hive, and it's called the Langstroth hive. That is the most common type in America, not in the world, but in America. And because of the movable frames, made beekeeping much more conducive to farming. And so in the 1800s, the beekeeper bees and beekeeping became more of a farming and a commercialized operation. So the reasons that someone might want to become a beekeeper. Now, you heard in the introduction that I had blueberry bushes and I wanted bees because I wanted to have more blueberries. And interestingly enough, blueberries aren't the best thing for honeybees. The bumblebees love the blueberries, but not necessarily honeybees. And so when I decided that I was going to venture into bees, I wanted to have more of my garden. I was a spring vegetable gardener, and I love to have all sorts of vegetables, and thought, well, this would be a good way. And in doing so, I became a hobby beekeeper because I became fascinated with the growth of the bees themselves and the beehives. And as I learned about the bees, I learned about all the hive products. And then that made me more interested in the plants that the bees could forage on. So I have expanded my knowledge about plants. And also, then you have more things about bees that you can do, more reasons. You can become an environmentalist because you want to have everything as natural as possible, because we know that pesticides and chemicals and fungicides are detrimental to our bees. And even if we use bee-friendly pesticides, there's still some effect on the bees and the environment. The professional pollinator or the commercial operations, where I think it's somewhere of 90% of all colonies, beehive colonies, go to California in January to pollinate the almond. And the almonds back in 1985 had 500,000 managed almond tree acreage, and now they have like 1.3 million. And the need for the honeybee requires more than all the honeybee colonies that are in west of the Rockies, so that the people from Florida and Georgia actually have to go out to pollinate if the almond growers want to get their plants, their fruit set in as many almonds as possible. So that's a $5 billion industry. Almonds are the leading part of that industry, but then there are other crops throughout the United States that beekeepers will take their bees to. And then I became a honey judge and an educator about honeybees and kind of a little bit of an ambassador. And then I also started learning about apitherapy. So those are some of the reasons you could become a beekeeper and why you might want to become a beekeeper. And what I find fascinating about it is that you start for one reason and then you learn about something else, which impacts something else, which leads you to another avenue of beekeeping. So it can be all encompassing. And it's almost like you can't be the like I think of myself as an expert, or at least I like to produce really good quality comb honey, and I can't do some of the other things at the level of which I think I can produce comb honey, because you can't be a perfectionist in everything, and that's the cool thing about beekeeping. You just pick what you like about it. Okay, so the issues about beekeeping are when to start, the cost, and then the time commitment, because I think that's one of the biggest things that we don't look at. We say, okay, well, it's only going to be $100 for this, and that won't be a big deal. But does that item that you're going to use on your bees, is that going to take more time than you can afford to do it? So the overall issue for me is getting started, and then the cost, and then, you know, where are we going to go with the time? So when I talk to people about starting beekeeping, what I say is read a little bit and educate yourself a little bit, because we all know that honeybees sting, and we all know that there are going to be some side effects from those stings. And for anybody who says that they're allergic, and I hear a lot of people say that, I'm allergic, I'm allergic, I'm allergic. Well, the truth is everyone is allergic. So everybody is allergic because you will have some reaction to the sting. Now, is it the really bad allergy that you become anaphylactic and you can't breathe? That's a very small group of people that actually are allergic. And when you guys are out working in the garden, you know, you're around pollinators all the time, plus other insects that bite or sting. And the first thing everybody says is, I was stung by a bee and it gave me a problem. So I'm kind of defensive on that aspect, but I'm getting off my track. So I want you to learn a little bit more about bees, read a little bit about the work involved with bees, and hopefully some of those questions that you'll get answered with me tonight. You got to read about the biology of bees. You have to decide what kind of hives you want. The most common, like I said, is the Langstroth, but there are there are a lot of other hives that you can invest in. You need to get some safety equipment. You need some harvest equipment if you're going to take the honey. Now, some beekeepers don't take honey; they just leave it on the hive. And then also some wax equipment if you're going to harvest your wax at all. So again, we'll just jump to cost. Those are the things that you need to think about when you're getting started. So the cost about getting started with the pens, like I said before. So the first thing you need to do is your education, and that depends on how much you want to spend on that. You can there are lots and lots of good books about backyard beekeeping, or you can read online, and there's tons of free information that you can get online. There's also internet courses that you could enter and pay for, and I don't necessarily recommend those. I think that what would be your best use of your money is to join a bee club and go to a bee club and start talking to the people that are actual beekeepers versus paying for an online course. So that's the first part of the education. Then you have to decide when you want to get bees. Bees generally are sold in the springtime. You can buy bees anywhere from March, April, May, June. After that time, it's hard to get bees because everyone is working toward the next year and getting everything ready so that they can do what they need to do for next year. And then the type of the bees that you want to buy, there's a bee package, a bee nucleus. You can buy a full hive, or you can try to catch a swarm. Swarms are free. Swarms are, I had alluded to that earlier, that's the natural propagation of honeybees. When there's a really good, really strong hive in the spring, there's lots of pollen and nectar out in the environment, and they're bringing a lot of pollen and nectar in the environment. The bees will decide that they can break off and form a new nest elsewhere. And so they'll prepare the queen, and then they will make some queen cells inside the hive, and they will say right at the day that the queen cells are actually capped, they'll say, okay, it's time to go. They'll leave, and then the queen cells will hopefully hatch within the next 2 to 3 days, and then start the process of going out on the mating flight and coming back in and laying eggs and starting all over again. Swarms generally have about a 25% chance of survival if they're not captured by a beekeeper and put into a hive. So if you have, if you see a swarm and it's hanging on a tree, call a beekeeper. You can get my number, and I'm in Cobb County, and I'll be happy to come and get it if I'm not working and doing my job that pays the mortgage. Okay. So then we have to decide how many packages or how many nukes or how many hives we're going to buy. Most beekeepers, like master beekeepers or experienced beekeepers, will tell new beekeepers it's better for you to buy 2 packages or 2 nukes or 2 hives. And the reason why is if you have a problem with one hive, you can see how the problem is when you look at the other hive, because that may not have the same problem. And if there's some adjustments you can do between the 2 hives, then you could take a frame or 2 of bees and brood from one hive and put it in the other hive to make it stronger if you need to do that, or equalize your hives. And that's more of an advanced thing, but that's why we recommend 2, so you can actually see which one's doing really well and is there a problem with the other one, or they both might do very well for you. Then you should investigate the hive types. If I had to do it over again, I would do a horizontal hive or the AZ hive because of my back. The challenge with Langstroth hives is that they are heavy, and they are boxes stacked one on top of the other, and they could be 6 frames, they could be 8 frames, they could be 10 frames. And when you pick up a box of honey that has 10 frames in it, and it's full of bees, and it's the wood and full of honey, if it's full of honey, it can weigh 75 to 100 pounds if you've got a really good full box of honey. And after you're 10, 15, 20 years of doing that, there might be a back issue there. And so you would think that it would behoove you to say, oh, maybe I need to switch to 8 frames. I started with 10 frames and then switched to 8 frames. And now I'm trying to use the Layens hive, and I have an AZ hive, and I also have a horizontal Langstroth hive that I'm working on. I'm seeing which one I like best to move towards that arena so I can continue to beekeeping for the next 25 or 30 years. And if I had started at the very beginning and just did one type of hive and not switched around so much, I wouldn't have spent as much money as I did on the equipment. Then when you buy the hives, you need extra equipment, because when you are going to purchase you're going to get honey or get extra, you want to get honey, then you have to have extra equipment that they can store the honey in and build the honey up from the nectar. And if you don't have a box there, then you won't be able to capture that honey. And then protective gear, you're going to want to buy a suit, a jacket, a veil, a gloves. So what's the cost of all this? Well, like I said, depends. So a bee nuke, which is it's 5 frames. Generally, it's 5 frames of bees with a queen, with brood and honey, and varying stages of brood, so that you will have, it's like a mini hive, and it's going to grow. And you're probably, if you buy it in April or March or April, then you will be able to get honey off of it this year. So what I would have done if I was buying nukes last year, I would have ordered my nukes sometime in, some places are taking reservations now, through December or January. And the first come, first serve. So if you want to buy nukes, now's the time to do it. Sign up for some different places and buy the nukes. And if you get in there first, then you'll get the first nukes that are produced, which is usually late March. Usually late March, you can get your hands on a nuke early April. And that's important because our nectar flow here in this area, right around here, starts somewhere in mid-March, as long as there's not the freeze. And we have the flowers starting to bloom, and can last up through, I generally say, Father's Day. And it all depends on the weather, because if the weather's really good and we have the right amount of rain and we have the support of the right amount of sun, those flowers are going to continue to bloom. And if the temperature's just right, then we're going to be okay with our nectar flow. And the longer the nectar flow, the more honey you can actually collect. So the nukes can be anywhere from generally $175 for those 5 frames to $250. So if you're going to buy 2 of them at, let's say, $200 each, that's $400. And that's only bees. You have not purchased anything else. And this is for your first year. Packages are a little bit less expensive because the bee producer is not selling you the frames. You're just getting, basically you're getting a little box with about 3 pounds of bees and 1 queen in it. And it's what you're going to have to do is take those bees and put them into your equipment onto frames where they're going to have to build up the frames, and they're going to have to draw them out and put wax down so they can have that telltale honeycomb all across it, and be able to fill it up with nectar and allow the queen to lay. So with packages, it's a little more difficult and it takes a little more time to get started. It can probably delay you a week or 2 for them to pull those frames out if you don't have any drawn comb. If you have drawn comb and you put a package in, it is going to be 21 days from the day that the queen lays the eggs until those new workers come out of the hive. And it'll be another 21 to 28 days from those new workers to the time that they will be able to forage for nectar, pollen, or water, or propolis. And those, so you're talking 6 weeks of time. And if you get your package in April 1st, you're at May 15th when you are just having those bees being able to go out and forage. And so your amount of bees that will be able to collect that nectar will be less than if you have a full hive going into spring that's continually making bees and getting ready for that whole nectar flow. So generally you can get a box, Langstroth box, a top for it and a bottom for it for about $75. But then you have to buy the super box where if you want to collect honey, that the bees will have a place where they can store the honey. And if it's a really good nectar flow, then you might need 2 supers for that hive. And remember, each of those supers has to have frames in it. And so when you start looking at those costs, if you wanted that $75 hive to have that super can be, if it's a 10 frame, it's going to be another $50 for another box. So now you're looking at $125, and it might actually be like $135. So now you've got 2, because remember you have 2 hives, and now you're up to about a $650 investment to get started without doing anything else. That's if you're buying the Langstroth hive. The top bar hives are a little different. They can run anywhere from $300 to $400. The AZ hive generally is about $300. The Layens hive, you can actually make that yourself for about $50 worth of wood. And then the long Langstroth hive, you can buy one for somewhere around $250. So you guys can, if you want more detail about that cost, it's very variable. It depends on who you buy it from and where you buy it. I try to buy here locally in Georgia. So then protective gear, even that can be a little bit of difference. This is a jacket, and it is a jacket that's breathable. I don't know if you could see that. Let me pull the arm out. And it's cooler in the summertime, a little bit cooler in the summertime, but it's got a mesh on it, and then it's got I don't know if you could see that, a mesh on it that's inside, and then there's a covering to keep the bees off of you on the outside, but it's definitely cooler, but it costs more than just a regular bee jacket. And you can also get the full suit, or you can just buy a veil and not have a jacket or a suit, or you can just get gloves or not have gloves. All of that, those costs depend. But if you're going to talk about protective equipment and you want a jacket and gloves, then you're looking at probably another $100 just to protect yourself. Then you have to have your smoker. I got another show and tell. Now this smoker is a little bit larger. It's longer. Pine straw, which I just use out of my back of my yard. There's a shorter, there's about two or three different other types of smokers. And the smokers, somewhere $50, I think. You have to have a hive tool, and there's different types of hive tools. There's the Easy Pry hive tool, and then there's just your regular hive tool without Easy Pry, and you end up buying all sorts of tools. When you look online and you look at the costs and you say, okay, the cost for a hive is $500 plus, and I think it's closer to $1,000. I think that when you start investing into the bees, you're going to really want to do the right thing, and you're going to want to be protected, and you're going to want to have those items. Now, I haven't talked about extracting equipment or wax melting equipment or anything like that. This is just to get started. So because I go to a lot of conferences, and I try to continue to be educated and learn more. My honey sells for about $8,000 a jar, because if I put all my time, effort, and education plus what I do into the honey and did a cost analysis basis, that's about how much I should sell it for. It's pretty interesting. Okay, so time commitment. And sorry I misspelled that, commitment. I thought I spell checked everything. So your beekeeping calendar really starts the year before you start beekeeping as a beekeeper, but as a new beekeeper, you're going to start as soon as you get your bees in March. But we start sometime in October, really the summertime, but I'm going to start with October. This is where as a beekeeper, what you're trying to do is prepare your equipment, make your plan about what do you want to do next year, how many hives do you want to maintain, how much honey do you want to get, if you have wax or propolis that you want to put, or pollen that you want to put into soaps, you want to make soaps or lotions or salves. These are your hive products. This is a good time to do this, October through January, because there's not a lot of beekeeping in Georgia that you do after October. You should have your hives all buttoned up. Maybe some supplemental feeding if you need to do that, but for the most part, it is a downtime, considered a downtime for the beekeeper. Okay. So starting in February through June, it's fairly busy. This is when you're out checking the hives. You're getting those bees at their peak for the flow, because as soon as the flow happens, and Georgia's flows doesn't start on like May 15th, it can start March 15th. And it's hard to have bees ready from January through March 15th because our weather is so up and down in Georgia. If I remind you, back in 16, we had 2 different snowstorms, I believe, and we had freezes, and it was a mess. When it's mild winters, it's fine. I mean, it's really, really good for us. It gives the bees start cranking up, and you just have to keep your eyes on the hives and make sure that you're not swarming. You need to do mite checks. You need to see where the brood nest is, how big the brood nest is. You might need to split your hives, but you really are starting to be more busy and really starting getting ready, and you should have your equipment ready to pop boxes on when the bees are getting strong, and you know that they're bringing in more nectar and more pollen, and they want more bees to build up that brood. And this is like an exciting time for us in the beekeeping world, because this is when you're going to actually kind of more manage your bees to get them to the point where that if you can collect 500 pounds of nectar to turn that into honey, that's what you want to do. It's really always, it's optimism and hope for us at this time of the year. So once June or July rolls around, I said I like to collect my harvest I like to collect my my honey right around Father's Day or right after Father's Day. At July 1st, I consider this is the dearth time for us, but it could be any time from June 1st to July 1st. They're bringing in a lot less nectar, and at that point in time, they're becoming more defensive in their hives. So I like to pull my honey after Father's Day. And I always, because I'm certified naturally grown, I pull less honey than I could pull. There are some beekeepers that will go and pull every frame of honey that they can find. And always of the mind that I need to wait because we don't know what our winters are going to be like. We don't know if we're going to have a really good goldenrod flow. There's goldenrod and aster in the fall, and the bees rely on that to be able to bring that nectar in to get through the winter on. So I think that for me, I'd rather take less because I'm not a commercial beekeeper. I don't need to make my mortgage payment off selling honey, and I try to be respectful of the bees, and I'm really trying to care for them and manage them to the best of my ability so that they can be as successful as possible. So the June or July honey harvest, you're talking, it's a good solid 4 or 5 days for me. I have to go out and check the hives. I have to decide how much honey I'm going to pull. I have to pull all the honey off. I have to make sure that the bees are out of the boxes that I'm pulling the honey off. And then we have to decap and we have to spin our frames. And that generally is an all-day event. And then you have to clean up. And then after that, I didn't even add bottling into this or putting your labels on and allowing the time to sit. It's a fun time. It's a very fun time. It's just, this is some of the time that you might have to have. And then during the July through October, you're really just supplementing them. You're checking your hives for mites. You're treating if you treat, and then you're just getting them ready to hit the road in October. And hopefully everything is prepared that you don't have any hives that will starve out over the winter time. And then you can get ready and do your planning so that the spring, which is very hopeful, in the when January comes around, where you can just imagine having hundreds of pounds of honey come in. What you can do is you can provide forage as the beekeeper, as the master gardeners, and you can also buy hive products from a local beekeeper. You can give our names out for people who might want to catch swarms, or if you know somebody that says, hey, there's bees on my tree, or if people are looking for local honey or hive products themselves. And if you decided you wanted to be a beekeeper, the first thing I would say right now is join a club. We have a state organization that's pretty active, and we're actually going to have a meeting September 25th, 26th, and 27th, the Georgia Beekeepers Association. It's a virtual meeting. It's online. I think it's $15, and you can go and check it out if you'd like to head over there. I think it's our first time doing a virtual meeting, and we're pretty excited about it. I think it might be a way for us to be able to present more information to our beekeepers in the state of Georgia.
Thank you, Mary. That was a wonderful presentation.
We hope that you will find our information informative and helpful. Thanks for watching, and please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel.